it was very interesting where I ended up, basically. Because anytime that I had been recommended to watch this movie, I've heard many Christians say this, where it's like it's a Christ parallel story. Like Christian is like a Christ parallel, which I could see that, even though it's a flawed parallel, which we would talk about on here all the time, where it's like, okay, just because we're saying that this person is a Christ figure doesn't mean, that they're perfect or you should follow their example and everything. But when I was watching it this time, and again, whenever you're watching something for popcorn theology, you tend to just notice things differently. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
find every time that I'm watching a movie for the podcast. I'm like, how come I never saw that before? And it's like, it really is. You can't be a mindless consumer. Even I still do it, even though I'm technically trained not to. And so what I found is I did not find another Christ parallel. We're not going to talk about that. I think Christian is symbolic of a Christian. Honestly, that's simple. And maybe even a particular Christian. I'll get to that. But first, I kind of wanted to flesh out, again, like we were talking about, overarching big picture themes, which is what this Red Curtain trilogy is all about. This is what Moulin Rouge is all about. And Baz Luhrmann based this story on the story of Orpheus. And so, for those of you who don't know their Greek mythology, Orpheus was a mortal musician whose wife Eurydice, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but we're gonna go with that, was bitten by a snake and she died. And so she goes to the underworld. And he travels to the underworld, where Hades is moved to let him take his wife back to the world above, but only if they don't look back. But when he sees the sunshine ahead, he looks back at her and she disappears. She's lost him forever. And so that's what the story is based off of. And now this should remind you of another story. I mean, immediately I was like, okay, Lot and his wife, like, don't look back. She looked back. She was lost forever. But honestly, that one doesn't work even as well as the other one I found. The one that I really landed on was that it dawned upon me watching this time that, again, Christian was not a messiah or savior, or even really like Lot, but this is basically a retelling of the story of Hosea and Gomer. And I can't believe it never hit me that way before. So, our protagonist named Christian, right? And I don't think that's an accident. So he's obsessed with love, right? It's like his whole thing. I'm obsessed with love. I moved to Paris to be part of the children of the revolution. I believe in freedom, truth, love, beauty. But he doesn't even know what love is. He admits it. But the problem is, I've never been in love until Satine. But she's a prostitute. She is flesh for hire, and yet he loves her completely. And he's even surprised by, I think, by why he loves her. And so he woos her and he saves her for himself, even when she strays. And again, this is just like Hosea and Gomer. This is a prophet who marries a prostitute. And God tells us this story because he was comparing Israel and himself. So, as a husband whose wife has committed adultery, right? And he's using this visceral image and this real life situation. Like, he literally told Hosea to go and marry a prostitute in order to live out this symbolic of what was going on between God and Israel. God wants us to save us from the underworld of sin. Christian wants to save Satine from this underworld of debauchery, and he wants to show her a better way. And I just love how, again, this is a musical, right? Musical month. And the music should help tell the story. And we already discussed that it's a jukebox musical, and they're just pulling different pop songs. But, like, it's amazing what the lyrics in these are saying and how it really helps to further the theme. So basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through, not every song because that would take way too long, but I'm going through like the main songs that tell the story basically, and like how this mirrors the Hosea and Gomer story. So in the beginning, Satine enters, right? And she's singing Diamonds are a Girl's Best Friend. And one of the lines in there is, the French are glad to die for love. They delight in fighting duels. But I prefer a man who lives and gives expensive jewels. So she is a material girl living in a material world. That's the other juxtaposition of the song. They mash those two together. But Christian comes in and changes that. And in your song, Christian shows her what true love is. He's not about using her. He's about lifting her up and seeing her as a person and not an object. And I find it interesting in this movie because, again, you could walk away from this movie and maybe think that they're trying to glorify sin a little bit, like, oh, look, this colorful brothel and the colorful costumes, and it's just fun. Everyone's having fun. Um, but it's really not. It's candy coated misery.
Mhm.
And I think that they show that. I honestly don't think they would make this movie today because in that bedroom scene, right before he sings that song, he's so embarrassed by her behavior in that scene. And I won't describe it for you because I don't want to get like doxxed or anything, but it can be a little weird. But she's acting like a prostitute basically, and he's very embarrassed by that. And by the end of that song, she's embarrassed by it as well. So he changes her outlook on this, which leads us into our next song, basically Satine's song by her solo, "Someday I'll Fly Away." Someday I'll fly away, leave all this to yesterday. So she wants to leave, but how? And then we move into the elephant medley, which that is my favorite
Yes.
song in this movie. It's not one song though; it's a juxtaposition of many, many different songs. But it's so beautiful. And one of the lines in there is, "Love makes us act like we are fools." So again, she's going back into her mindset. So she thinks that love makes you weak and poor and foolish, but we know that God uses what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. So, and again, Christian is changing all her outlook on this. So then we're going to skip over a couple songs and we're going to go to "Come What May," which that's the only original song in the movie. And I kind of view this, and again, this is kind of there's no wedding in this movie. Like, Christian never marries Satine, so I want to get that out of the way. And I don't condone that. Like, but I don't think the film, again, it's not about that, so it's not that kind of story. So I don't blame it. And again, this is a secular director. He's making a secular movie, even though he's has some awesome biblical themes that are in there that he may not have meant to put in there. But I view this song kind of like their wedding song because it's basically a song about making vows to each other. They're promising to each other that they're going to be together till the end of time. I'll love you till my dying day. So this is kind of like their covenant making song to me. So if there is a marriage in this movie, it's that song.
It's like One Hand, One Heart in West Side Story. And
Yes.
that's, no
Yeah.
marriage,
No
but
marriage.
it's as
But
close as we come. So
yeah, it's
yeah,
in a church. It's like
yeah.
basically you're there, so thematically we're there.
Hmm.
And so this is like basically their wedding song. So they are promising basically fidelity to each other. And then the very next, or I think there is another song in between that, but next song that we're going to jump into is Roxanne, which is like the total opposite of that. And so Roxanne is the number, is shows you how destructive sin can be, how it kind of pulls you back in. Satine's tempted by the material, worldly things again. She's like, I just have to be with this Duke, for one night, and then he'll give us whatever we want. We can end the show how we want. I'm gonna get this beautiful diamond necklace, and just Christian is just utterly distraught by this. And this is actually another one of my favorite numbers in here, to be honest. It's a very visceral scene, and it is heartbreaking.
Hmm.
And it's another thing that I feel like this movie does really well, is showing jealousy not as like a bad thing, because like sometimes we say that our God is a jealous God, and that's not a bad thing to say that, because he is. And I think Christian is jealous of Satine in all the right ways. She shouldn't be doing this. It's sinful. And they never use the word sinful in this movie, but you can just, again, by his acting and the dance numbers, that he's just utterly heartbroken, distraught, and he just wants her to come back to him. And so that kind of moves into this darker version of Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend for their next to final number. So the Diamonds song, got Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend song that came before, was so glitzy and glamorous and fun. Again, that those first like 20 minutes of the movie, it's so zany and crazy. And we get that same song, and yet it's totally different this time. It's dark, literally. Like the whole thing is like got a blue tint over it, and it's very somber. And you just know that like this isn't the right thing to want. Like she shouldn't be wanting this. And that's when Christian comes back, right? And he throws the money at her. He's kind of given up on her. Um, and it's just so heartbreaking. I hate that scene. It just hurts me to watch. And but then that goes into the reprise of "Come What May," and one line in that song that I was noticing was "Come back to me and forgive everything." So she's begging his forgiveness. She's like, "Please forgive me. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I need you." And then that's where again, I don't know how, when, because I was reading the story of Hosea and Gomer again today, just to refresh, and we actually don't really know how their story ends, to be honest. Like, he did eventually buy her back from being in slavery and a prostitute, but it doesn't really say anything about how the rest of their lives went. So we don't really know. Um, but in this story, tragedy strikes, right? And it's this tragic end to the story. But that's where I might disagree. I don't know if it's actually as tragic as I thought, maybe even the first couple times watching it, because it's not the end, it's the beginning. Like, literally, Christian has told us from the beginning that Satine is going to die. We know through the whole movie that this is going to be tragic. She's going to die. He's going to be left alone, and he's writing about it. But why is he writing about it? And you had said it earlier. It's like she told him they were dying in each other's arms, and she told him that he needed to tell this story, a story about a love that will live forever. And I don't think that's as tragic as people think. I think it's beautiful because it's transcending space and time, just like the Father's love for us. Even though we die in this life, our life is joined up with the other saints who have died for the same thing. And it's all a big love story. It's a story about the greatest love ever of the Son that he bestows on his bride, the church. And it's a story about love that will go on for all eternity eventually. And I'm just so glad that that struck me this time, that's what I took away from this, because it does seem like a tragic story, and it's hard to watch the ending of this movie because you're like, they don't end up together. But that's not really the point, I think.
We hope you enjoyed this snack-sized taste of popcorn theology. Check out the full episode using the link in the description. Subscribe on YouTube for more content. Follow and interact on social media to share with others. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.